Thomas Sterling sat in his luxurious penthouse office, swirling an expensive whiskey in his crystal glass, while his friends laughed at his latest complaint about gold diggers pursuing his fortune. At 35, he was one of the city's most eligible bachelors, with looks that matched his bank account. "I swear, every woman who approaches me just wants access to my money," Thomas sighed, running his hand through his perfectly styled hair. James Wilson, his childhood friend and now business rival, smirked from across the mahogany desk. "Perhaps you're just not looking in the right places, Tom. Real love exists. You're just too cynical to see it." "Love?" Thomas scoffed. "It's all about status and money. No woman would want me if I wasn't rich." "Care to put your money where your mouth is?" James challenged, leaning forward with a dangerous glint in his eye. "What do you have in mind?" Thomas asked, intrigued despite himself. "A bet. You have to marry someone completely opposite of your usual type. Someone society would never expect you to choose. Let's say an overweight woman from a humble background. Stay married for 1 year, treat her well, give her a real chance. If you prove that she's just after your money, I'll pay you $10 million. But if genuine love develops, you pay me." Thomas nearly choked on his whiskey. "You can't be serious." "Afraid you'll lose," James taunted. "Or maybe you're worried you'll actually fall in love." The other men in the room watched with interest as Thomas's competitive nature took over. He had never backed down from a challenge, especially one from James. "Fine, 1 year, but I choose the woman," Thomas declared, extending his hand. James shook it firmly. "Deal. But she has to meet the criteria. No model secretly wearing a fat suit." That weekend, Thomas found himself in parts of the city he'd never visited before, observing women who wouldn't normally catch his eye. He was about to give up when he spotted her. Sarah Mitchell, a kindergarten teacher helping children plant a community garden. She was significantly overweight, dressed in simple clothes that did nothing to flatter her figure. But there was something about her smile, the gentle way she handled the children, that made him pause. Perfect, he thought, not from attraction but from calculating how shocking their pairing would appear to society. Thomas spent weeks orchestrating what appeared to be chance meetings, playing the role of a wealthy man, humbled by her kindness and genuine nature. Sarah was initially suspicious of his attention, but his persistent charm eventually wore down her defenses. When he proposed after just 3 months of dating, Sarah was overwhelmed. Her friends and family warned her it was too soon, that men like Thomas Sterling didn't suddenly fall for women like her without an ulterior motive. But Sarah, who had always felt invisible to men, couldn't resist the fairy tale being offered. The wedding was a lavish affair, making headlines across the city. "Sterling heir marries plus-size teacher," the tabloids screamed. Thomas played his part perfectly, defending Sarah against the cruel headlines and gossip, while secretly enjoying how perfectly his plan was unfolding. Sarah moved into his penthouse, bringing her modest possessions into his world of luxury. She tried to maintain her teaching job, but Thomas insisted she quit, claiming he wanted to spoil her with a life of leisure. In reality, he wanted to make her completely dependent on his wealth. As weeks passed, Thomas waited for signs that Sarah was taking advantage of his fortune. Instead, she maintained her humble ways, often cooking instead of ordering from expensive restaurants, declining his offers of extravagant jewelry, and continuing to volunteer at community gardens. She even suggested they donate to causes supporting education and community development, showing more interest in helping others than indulging herself. Thomas found himself increasingly confused by her behavior. It didn't fit the gold digger narrative he'd expected. One evening, returning home earlier than usual, he found Sarah crying in their bedroom. His first thought was that she'd finally reveal her true nature, demanding more luxury or threatening to expose him. Instead, her words shook him to his core. "I feel like I'm losing myself," she sobbed. "I love you, Thomas, but ever since we married, I feel less and less like the person I used to be. I miss my students, my independence, my purpose, all this luxury. It's beautiful, but it's not making me happy." Thomas stood frozen, realizing that in his quest to prove love was just about money. He'd never considered the possibility that someone might actually prefer a simpler life. Sarah's tears weren't those of a manipulator, but of a genuine soul struggling to maintain her identity in his world of excess. For the first time since making the bet, Thomas felt something he hadn't expected: shame. As he watched his wife cry, he began to question everything he thought he knew about love, wealth, and happiness. The game he'd been playing suddenly felt cruel and hollow, while Sarah's authentic nature shone like a beacon of truth in his artificial world. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge every belief he held about love, worth, and what truly matters in life. As he stood there, watching Sarah's tears fall, the first crack appeared in the wall he'd built around his heart, though he wasn't ready to acknowledge it yet. Sarah's emotional breakdown marked a turning point in their marriage, though Thomas wasn't ready to admit it. Instead, he threw himself into work, trying to avoid confronting the uncomfortable feelings her tears had stirred within him. But life had other plans. During a routine medical checkup, Sarah received concerning news. Her weight and stress levels were causing health issues. The doctor recommended immediate lifestyle changes and regular exercise. Thomas's first instinct was selfish. A health crisis wasn't part of his plan for winning the bet. However, watching Sarah receive the news with quiet dignity, he felt an unfamiliar urge to actually help her. "I'll hire the best personal trainers," he offered, reaching for his phone. Sarah shook her head. "No, Thomas. I need to do this my way. Would you consider joining me for evening walks? Just us. No phones, no business calls." The request was simple yet terrifying. Evening walks meant conversation, connection, exactly what Thomas had been avoiding. But refusing would seem suspicious, so he reluctantly agreed. Their first walks were awkward, filled with long silences. But gradually, something unexpected happened. Sarah began sharing stories about her students, her childhood dreams, her fears. Thomas found himself listening, really listening, not just waiting for signs of materialism or manipulation. He learned about her father's death when she was young, how she'd helped raise her siblings while her mother worked multiple jobs, how she'd put herself through college, choosing teaching despite its modest salary because she believed in making a difference. "Money never made me happy," she confided during one walk. "What makes me happy is creating something meaningful, helping others grow." These words haunted Thomas. Here was someone who had every opportunity to exploit his wealth, yet consistently chose purpose over luxury. It challenged everything he believed about human nature. As weeks passed, their walks became longer, their conversations deeper. Sarah's health improved, but more notably, she began reclaiming her identity. She started a small reading program for underprivileged children, using one of Thomas's unused properties as a learning center. Thomas found himself attending these reading sessions, initially to maintain appearances. But watching Sarah light up while teaching, seeing the children's excitement as they mastered new words, he felt something shift inside him. One evening, after a particularly successful reading session, Sarah hugged him spontaneously. "Thank you for supporting this," she whispered. Thomas froze, realizing two shocking things simultaneously. Her touch felt genuinely good, and he had supported the program not for show, but because he actually cared. Later that night, unable to sleep, Thomas confronted an uncomfortable truth. Sarah was changing him. Her authenticity was slowly but surely dismantling his cynicism. She approached life with a compassion and purpose that made his wealth-focused existence feel hollow. James noticed the change during their monthly dinner. "You seem different," he observed. "Don't tell me you're actually falling for her." Thomas quickly denied it, but the question lingered. Was he falling for Sarah? Or was he simply becoming a better person through her influence? A crisis point came when Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The news should have terrified Thomas. A baby wasn't part of the bet's terms. Instead, watching Sarah's face glow with joy, he felt an unexpected surge of happiness. That night, alone in his office, Thomas stared at the bet contract. In less than 3 months, he could reveal everything, collect his money, and end this charade. Yet, for the first time, the thought brought no satisfaction. Instead, he found himself thinking about Sarah's laughter during their walks, her passion for teaching, the way she made him question his values. He thought about the baby growing inside her, an innocent life that would be shattered by the truth. Thomas realized he was standing at a crossroads. Continue with his cruel game and destroy something genuine, or acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong about love all along. The Thomas from 6 months ago would have chosen money without hesitation, but that Thomas hadn't known Sarah, hadn't experienced the quiet strength of unconditional love, hadn't felt the warmth of genuine connection. As he sat in his darkened office, the bet contract seemed to mock him. He had set out to prove that love was just another transaction. Instead, he was learning that real love, the kind Sarah offered freely, was worth more than all his millions. The pregnancy was changing everything, forcing Thomas to confront not just who he was, but who he wanted to be. The game he'd started for money now had much higher stakes, the heart of a good woman and the future of their child. Sarah's pregnancy progressed, and with it came unexpected complications. Her blood pressure became dangerously high, requiring bed rest. Thomas found himself genuinely worried, not about the bet, but about her well-being. "I've hired the best doctors," he assured her, holding her hand in the hospital. The gesture, once calculated, now felt natural. "I don't need the best doctors," Sarah smiled weakly. "I just need you here with me." Her words struck Thomas deeply. Throughout her health struggles, Sarah never once mentioned money or demanded expensive treatments. Her only request was his presence and support. During her mandatory bed rest, Thomas surprised himself by rearranging his entire schedule to work from home. He found himself bringing her books, reading to her, and discussing names for their baby. The intimate moments they shared were changing him in ways he couldn't ignore. One evening, while Sarah slept peacefully, Thomas received a call from James. "3 weeks left until the bet ends," James reminded him. "Should I prepare the paperwork for your win?" Thomas looked at Sarah's sleeping form, her hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly. The thought of betraying her trust made him physically ill. "I need to tell you something," Thomas began, but Sarah stirred in her sleep, murmuring his name with such trust and love that the words caught in his throat. The next day, Sarah's condition worsened. The doctors recommended an emergency C-section, though she was only 7 months along. Thomas had never felt such genuine fear. In the operating room, holding Sarah's hand, Thomas realized with crystal clarity that no amount of money was worth losing her. The bet, his cynicism, his entire worldview seemed ridiculous in the face of possibly losing the woman who had taught him what real love meant. Their daughter was born tiny, but fighting. As Thomas watched Sarah's face light up at their baby's first cry, he knew he had to confess everything. The risk of losing them both was devastating, but continuing the lie was worse. That night, after ensuring both Sarah and the baby were stable, Thomas sat by her hospital bed, gathering his courage. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice trembling. But Sarah spoke first. "I love you, Thomas. Not your money, not your status, just you. Even when you try to hide behind your wealth, I see the good man you really are." Her words, so pure and true, broke him. Thomas found himself confessing everything: the bet, his cynicism, his initial cruel intentions. But he also told her how she had changed him, how her love had taught him what really mattered in life. Sarah listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. When he finished, expecting her to order him out of her life, she surprised him yet again. "I knew," she said softly. "What?" Thomas stared at her in shock. "I overheard you and James talking at a charity event months ago. I was hurt, devastated even, but I decided to stay, to show you that real love exists, not for the bet, but for you." Thomas sat stunned, realizing that Sarah had known the truth all along, yet had continued loving him unconditionally, hoping to heal his wounded heart rather than punish his cruelty. Looking at their newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in her incubator, Thomas finally understood what true wealth meant. It wasn't about money or winning bets. It was about the richness of genuine love, the kind that sees past flaws and chooses to stay, to heal, to transform. In that moment, Thomas Sterling, the cynical millionaire who had tried to prove love was just another transaction, learned the most valuable lesson of his life. Real love wasn't about what you could get, but what you were willing to give. "I don't deserve you," he whispered to Sarah. "Love isn't about deserving," she replied, taking his hand. "It's about choosing each other every day through all our imperfections." The weeks following Sarah's confession brought profound changes to Thomas's life. After his own tearful admission about the bet, he reached out to James to end it. "Keep your money," Thomas told him firmly. "I've already won something far more valuable." James, seeing the genuine transformation in his friend, didn't argue. Instead, he made a surprising suggestion. Why not use the bet money to help Sarah's causes? This led to the creation of the Sterling Education Foundation, with Sarah as its director. The foundation focused on providing educational opportunities to underprivileged children, starting with expanding Sarah's reading program to multiple locations. Thomas watched in awe as Sarah thrived in her new role. She maintained her hands-on approach, still teaching children herself while managing the bigger picture. Her passion for education, combined with Thomas's business acumen, created something truly remarkable. Their daughter, whom they named Hope, grew stronger each day. Thomas found himself spending hours in the nursery, marveling at her tiny fingers and the unconditional love he felt for her. Through Hope, he understood even more deeply what Sarah had been teaching him all along, that life's greatest riches couldn't be measured in dollars. The transformation in their marriage was profound. Thomas no longer felt the need to prove anything or maintain appearances. He learned to appreciate the simple moments, family dinners, bedtime stories with Hope, evening walks that had become their tradition. Sarah's weight issues, once the superficial reason for Thomas's cruel bet, became a non-issue. They focused on health and happiness rather than appearances, supporting each other through lifestyle changes that came from love rather than societal pressure. Their story might have remained private, but Thomas felt compelled to share it. At a charity gala for the foundation, he publicly acknowledged how his prejudices and cynicism had almost cost him true happiness. His honesty, though risky, earned respect and sparked important conversations about love, acceptance, and genuine connection. Society gossip evolved from mocking their unlikely pairing to celebrating their authentic partnership. But Thomas and Sarah barely noticed. They were too busy building a life that mattered, raising their daughter, and expanding their foundation's impact. One evening, watching Sarah read to Hope, Thomas reflected on how close he had come to losing this precious gift. The bet that started as a cruel game had become the catalyst for his redemption, thanks to a woman whose capacity for love and forgiveness seemed limitless. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "About how you saw the good in me, even when I couldn't see it myself," he replied. "How you chose to love me despite knowing the truth." Sarah smiled, that same genuine smile that had first caught his attention, though for very different reasons now. "Love is always a choice," she said, "and I choose you every day." In that moment, surrounded by the family he never knew he wanted, Thomas Sterling finally understood that true wealth wasn't in his bank account. It was in the love he had learned to give and receive, the purpose he had found, and the legacy of kindness they were building together. Their story became a testament to love's transformative power, how it could turn a cynical bet into a beautiful reality, how it could change a hardened heart, and how it could build something lasting and meaningful from the most unlikely beginnings. 5 years after the fateful bet that changed their lives, Thomas and Sarah Sterling stood together at the opening of their 10th education center. Their daughter, Hope, now a vibrant kindergartner, held both their hands as they cut the ceremonial ribbon. The Sterling Education Foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams, helping thousands of children access quality education. More importantly, it had become a family mission, with Hope already showing her mother's passion for helping others. Sarah had maintained her authenticity throughout their success, still teaching classes regularly, despite her role as foundation director. Her weight had stabilized at a healthy level through gradual lifestyle changes, but more significantly, she had helped Thomas understand that true beauty came from within. The foundation's success attracted attention from other wealthy families, many of whom had initially mocked Thomas's marriage. Now they sought his advice not just on business matters, but on finding purpose beyond wealth. Thomas found himself mentoring other businessmen, sharing how Sarah's love had transformed his understanding of success. James, who had started it all with his challenging bet, became the foundation's strongest supporter. He often joked that losing the bet was the best investment he'd ever made, seeing how it had changed not just Thomas, but an entire community. Their marriage, built on such shaky ground, had grown into something extraordinary. Thomas and Sarah's evening walks continued, now with Hope skipping between them, filling the air with her chatter. These simple moments remained Thomas's favorite part of each day. During the Foundation's 5th anniversary celebration, Thomas surprised Sarah with a renewal of their vows. This time, there were no hidden agendas, no cruel bets, just pure love and gratitude for the journey they had shared. "When I first married you," Thomas admitted in his vows, "I thought I was playing a game. Instead, you taught me the true meaning of wealth. Your love wasn't about what I had, but who I could become. You saw past my walls and helped me build something meaningful instead." Sarah's response moved everyone to tears. "You may have started with a bet, but I always bet on love. Thank you for proving me right." Their story became legendary in their city, not for the scandal it initially caused, but for the transformation it inspired. The cynical millionaire and the kindergarten teacher had created something beautiful, a legacy of love, education, and genuine purpose. As they watched Hope grow, showing both her father's determination and her mother's compassionate heart, Thomas and Sarah knew that their greatest achievement wasn't the foundation or its many centers. It was the love they had built together, a love that continued to grow and touch lives far beyond their own. The bet that began as a cruel game had evolved into a powerful testament to love's ability to transform not just hearts, but entire communities. Thomas Sterling, once obsessed with proving love's monetary value, had instead proven its priceless worth. "We should thank James for that bet," Sarah mused one evening, watching Hope play in their garden. "No," Thomas replied, pulling her close. "We should thank you for being brave enough to love someone who didn't deserve it, for showing me that true wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in moments like these." Their legacy continued to grow, touching more lives with each passing year. But for Thomas and Sarah, their greatest treasure remained the love they shared. A love that had turned a cynical bet into a beautiful reality, proving that sometimes the richest things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings.